The slap landed so hard it silenced the courthouse steps. Sergeant Connor Brennan's handprint burned red across the cheek of the man he'd just cuffed, unaware that man was a sitting federal judge. Fake ID. Huh? Yale boy thinks he's special, Brennan snarled, ripping the gold badge in half and tossing it at Malik Washington's feet. Blood dripped from the judge's lip onto the marble engraved with Thurgood Marshall's name. Brennan shoved him against the wall, shouting, "Hands where I can see 'em!" Cameras turned. Security froze. Malik didn't flinch. He met Brennan's eyes and said quietly, "You just ended your bloodline. Sergeant?" The crowd gasped. Brennan laughed, thinking it was bluff. It wasn't. Before we dive into the story, where are you watching from? Make sure to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Every story here speaks to truth, justice, and consequence. Now, let's continue. Brennan dragged Malik toward the metal detectors, barking orders. "Empty your pockets! Backpack too." Malik complied without a word. His silence unsettled the younger officers. There was no fear in his eyes, only a calm that made them uneasy. Brennan's partners, Kelly and Rizzo, went live on their blue wall chat. 12,000 cops watching, laughing, typing comments like, "Put him down hard." One camera caught Malik's face perfectly as he whispered, "History repeats." Inside the courthouse lobby, the tension thickened. The guards recognized him instantly. "Wait," one said under his breath. "That's Judge Washington," Brennan snapped. "The hell it is. He's no judge. He's a faker." He shoved Malik again, hard enough that the man stumbled. Malik steadied himself, straightened his hoodie, and said evenly, "You're standing on federal property. Sergeant." "Think before you move again," Brennan smirked. "You threatening me?" "Boy!" Malik looked at him without blinking. "No, I'm warning you." Ortiz, the courthouse bailiff, hurried in from the corridor. The moment he saw Malik, his face turned pale. "Sergeant, release those cuffs," he ordered. Brennan spun on him. "Who are you?" Ortiz stepped closer, voice sharp. "Fallujah. 2004. He saved my life." Brennan frowned, confused. "What?" Ortiz pointed to the scar on Malik's wrist. "That man's a federal judge and a Marine veteran. You just assaulted both." The hall went dead quiet. One of the younger officers whispered, "Oh my God." Brennan's jaw locked. "No one touches that camera." He growled, lunging toward Rizzo's body cam. But it was too late. The footage had already synced to cloud storage, flashing "upload complete" in the blue wall chat. Officers were now realizing who they were watching. "Is that Washington? He's a federal judge." The laughter stopped. Panic spread. Malik lifted his cuffed hands and said, "Sergeant, escort me to my courtroom." Brennan hesitated. Malik's tone carried the weight of command, the kind that doesn't ask twice. The security officers opened the door. The hallway fell silent as Malik walked past, every step echoing like judgment itself. Brennan followed, sweating now, still trying to act in control but feeling the ground slip beneath him. When they reached courtroom 26B, Ortiz opened the doors. Malik stepped inside. The same courtroom where he had sentenced murderers, CEOs, and cartel lieutenants. Now he stood there in handcuffs. He turned slowly toward Brennan and said, "Take them off." Brennan hesitated. Ortiz barked, "Do it." The cuffs clicked open. Malik rubbed his wrists, picked up the gavel from the bench, and stared at its inscription, Fallujah 2004. He turned to Brennan. "You believe in justice." "Sergeant," Brennan muttered. "I believe in control." Malik nodded once. "Then you'll learn who truly has it." He motioned for Ortiz to seal the doors. "No one leaves." He said, "Not until the truth is on record." Brennan laughed nervously. "You're insane." Malik said nothing. He opened his tablet, pressed play, and a voice crackled through the speakers. It was Brennan's own. 50 keys. Clean. 1.2 million. Judge don't care. The color drained from Brennan's face. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Malik looked at him coldly. You sell the drugs you seize. You assault the citizens you swore to protect. And you dare touch me on the steps of justice. Brennan tried to reach for his phone, but Ortiz stepped forward, hand on his holster. Sit down. He growled. Brennan sat. Malik placed the gavel on the bench and said, Proceed. Cameras were rolling now. News crews had burst in, live streaming the impossible sight, the man once cuffed, now presiding, and the officer once laughing, now trembling in silence. Outside. The crowd grew. Reporters shouted questions. Protesters began gathering under the statue of Thurgood Marshall. And in that room, Malik Washington stood taller than he ever had in uniform or in court. You thought this was your city, he said quietly, but justice never belonged to you. The gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. The blue wall cracked that morning, and New York would never be the same again. The clang of the metal doors echoed through courtroom 26B as Sergeant Brennan forced Judge Malik Washington into the defendant's chair. Cameras blinked red from the press row. What started as a routine arrest had turned into a full-blown spectacle. Brennan adjusted his uniform collar, sweat glistening at the edge of his hairline. He didn't yet realize that the man sitting in front of him wasn't some random suspect. He was about to stand trial in the very room he thought he controlled. Judge Elias Goldstein, nervous and pale, entered from chambers. This is highly irregular, he muttered, glancing at Brennan, then at Malik. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, lawyers texting each other, marshals unsure whom to salute. Malik sat perfectly still, cuff marks red around his wrists, the faint cut on his cheek already dried. His silence filled the air with tension sharper than any shout could. Brennan grinned, playing to the cameras. Your Honor, we've got an uncooperative male, possible imposter, claims to be a judge, resisted questioning, tried to enter with restricted credentials. The lie rolled easily off his tongue. ADA Vanessa Chen, summoned in haste, stood beside him, adjusting her files. We'll be seeking remand, she said coolly. Given the circumstances, the state requests $500,000 bail. Her tone was professional, but her eyes betrayed unease. Something about the defendant didn't fit the usual pattern. Malik finally spoke. Calm. Precise. Your Honor, he said, before proceeding, I invoke Brady v. Maryland. All body cam footage, audio, and communications from this arrest must be preserved under federal discovery rules. The room went silent. Goldstein blinked, confused. Sir, you are not an attorney on record? Malik's gaze didn't waver. I am. In fact, the senior presiding judge of this courtroom. A ripple of gasps spread through the gallery. Brennan laughed, trying to drown out the disbelief. You hear that? He's delusional, claims he's the judge. He turned to the crowd. We got ourselves a real one, huh? But Ortiz, the bailiff, didn't laugh. He stepped forward, voice deep and steady. He's telling the truth. Brennan's smirk faded. Don't start with me. Ortiz. The bailiff ignored him, addressing the bench. Judge Goldstein. That man is Judge Malik Washington, SDNY, appointed in 2017. You can verify through the federal directory. Goldstein's face turned white. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. Brennan barked. This is a setup! I don't care who he says he is! He looked to Chen for support, but she was already typing on her tablet, cross-checking the name, in seconds. Her expression changed from skepticism to horror. Sergeant, she said carefully, his credentials are real. A cold silence gripped the room. Brennan's knees twitched. He attacked me first. He shouted. He threatened me. Malik spoke softly. I asked for your name. Sergeant, you responded with your hand. Brennan's face reddened, veins bulging. "You think your title saves you?" Malik tilted his head slightly. "It won't need to." Judge Goldstein cleared his throat, voice shaking. "Sergeant Brennan, please approach the bench." Brennan hesitated. "For what?" Goldstein's tone rose. "Now." Brennan swaggered up, pretending confidence. Goldstein leaned forward, whispering fiercely. "Do you have any idea who you just assaulted? You've jeopardized your career, your pension, your freedom." Brennan scoffed. "You think a slap's gonna end me? The union's got my back." Goldstein's eyes darted toward the corner where the NYPD union rep sat, stone-faced, making no move to intervene. That silence spoke volumes. Malik's composure never wavered. "Your Honor," he said, "under Rule 11, I move for immediate recusal. The presiding judge has a conflict. Fear." Goldstein stiffened, lips parting, unsure whether to be offended or relieved. He looked to Chen, who was now flipping through her files in disbelief. Malik continued. "The law provides no comfort to those who hide behind procedure." "I'll represent myself." Brennan scoffed. "You can't do that." Malik met his gaze. "I already have." Ortiz stepped closer to Malik, quietly murmuring. "Sir, are you sure you want to proceed here?" Malik replied, just as quietly. "This is the perfect place." He then addressed Chen. "Miss Chen, I assume you've reviewed the officer's record before accepting his testimony?" Chen blinked. "His record?" Malik leaned forward. 62 civilian complaints, 19 suspensions, 6 brutality cases closed without trial. He's been protected under the same union that now pretends not to see him. Chen swallowed hard. She hadn't known that. Brennan slammed his hand on the table. "You can't talk to her like that!" Malik's tone cut through the air. "You'll sit until I give you permission to speak. Even cuffed moments ago. His authority commanded obedience." Goldstein leaned back. "Defeated. I think this matter needs federal review." Malik smiled faintly. "It already has one." Ortiz's phone buzzed on the desk. A secure message from Chief Judge Rahman. Confirmed. Washington authorized. Do not interfere. Ortiz handed the phone to Goldstein, who read it, exhaled, and whispered, "My God." He stood, robe heavy on his shoulders, and muttered, "This court is in recess." Then, without meeting anyone's eyes, he slipped through the side door and vanished. For a moment, no one moved. Brennan's voice cracked the silence. "What's going on here? You can't just leave." Malik rose from his chair. "Sit down." "Sergeant, you wanted a courtroom. Now you have one." Ortiz unlocked the evidence screen on the wall, the monitor flickering to life. Brennan's bravado started to crumble. You can't use that without authorization." Malik's calm reply was ice cold. "Authorization came 11 months ago." Chen looked at him sharply. "What are you talking about?" Malik picked up his tablet, swiped once, and the room filled with recorded audio. Brennan's own voice spilled through the speakers, arrogant and unguarded. "We bagged the dope, split the cash, the captain's in on it. Nobody checks the evidence room." Brennan's mouth fell open. Kelly and Rizzo went pale. "That's..." Brennan stammered. "That's edited, it's fake." Malik's eyes stayed locked on him. "The FBI doesn't edit evidence." "Sergeant..." Chen stepped back, realization dawning. "You were part of a federal investigation," she whispered. Malik nodded slowly. "For 11 months. You and your unit have been under surveillance. RICO, racketeering, narcotics distribution, obstruction of justice." Brennan lunged forward, but Ortiz blocked him, shoving him back into his seat. Malik's voice dropped to a deadly calm. "I was going to let the Bureau finish their sweep, but then you slapped me." He reached for the gavel, his gavel, and held it loosely in one hand. "Now you'll face your reckoning sooner." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Chen demanded, "Judge Washington, I need to confer with the Bureau before." Malik cut her off. "No need. They're already watching." He pointed to the live security feed projected on the wall. Agents in black suits had entered the courthouse downstairs. Brennan slumped in his chair, sweat soaking through his collar. "You can't do this," he said weakly. Malik's voice was steady as steel. "I can. Because justice doesn't wait for permission." Ortiz crossed the floor and shut the courtroom doors, locking them. Malik stood behind the bench, his presence filling the space. "Court is now in session," he declared. Brennan's hands shook. You're not serious." Malik raised the gavel. "Deadly serious." He banged it once. The sound echoed like a hammer in a forge. Every officer, every lawyer, every spectator in that room realized they were no longer in an ordinary hearing. They were witnesses to history. The man they had cuffed an hour ago now stood as both victim and judge, ready to turn their world inside out. And as Brennan's laughter finally died, Malik Washington's silence returned, quiet, unyielding, and full of promise. The silent hammer had come down, and justice was just beginning. Bailiff Ortiz stepped into the hallway, phone trembling in his hand. His call to Chief Judge Aliyah Rahman connected on the first ring. "Aliyah," he whispered. "It's Malik. They've got him cuffed in his own courtroom." There was a pause, then a sharp inhale. "What?" she demanded. Ortiz looked through the glass at the scene inside. Malik standing before the bench, Brennan pacing like a caged wolf. "He's already taken control," Ortiz said. "He's calm." "Too calm." Rahman's voice was clipped, urgent. "Don't let him do anything rash. The Bureau's been monitoring that task force for months. Tell him the files are ready if he wants them." Ortiz nodded, hung up, and pushed the doors open again. Malik looked up from the bench. "It's done?" Ortiz gave a short nod. "They're online. Sir, secure line from Quantico." Malik exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that carried years of restraint. He turned his back to the courtroom and walked into chambers. Brennan scoffed. "What? He running away now?" Ortiz spun on him. "Quiet, or I'll tape your mouth shut." Brennan sank into the chair, his arrogance fading as the reality set in. This wasn't some traffic stop gone wrong. This was the unraveling of his entire life. Inside chambers. Malik opened the drawer where his robes hung. Black. Pressed. Untouched since last night. He stared at them for a moment, remembering the promise he made to his wife before she died in the North Tower, that he'd serve the law, not fear it. He set aside his hoodie and blood-stained shirt, slipped into the robe, and pinned his purple heart over his heart. The weight of it was familiar, heavy with history. He ran a hand over the engraved gavel sitting in a velvet case. Fallujah 2004. A gift from the Marines he led. He had earned the nickname the Silent Hammer there. Not for how he fought, but for how he decided. No wasted words, no hesitation. Justice. Swift and absolute. Malik touched the edge of the gavel, remembering the sound of mortars and the faces of the men he couldn't save. Then he looked at himself in the mirror. The blood was gone. The calm had returned. But his eyes carried the storm. They wanted to see a judge. He murmured, "Let them see one." Ortiz entered quietly, locking the door behind him. "Sir, Rahman authorized full access to the Bureau files. They sent the link to your tablet." Malik picked it up. The screen flickered with a secure interface. FBI Operation Iron Shield. 11 months of audio, video, text logs, thousands of lines of evidence. Brennan's voice filled half of it. Malik scrolled through names, transfers, payment trails, cartel contacts. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was catastrophic. "They moved 1.2 million through Cash App?" Malik asked, scanning the data. Ortiz nodded. "Using confiscated funds. They sold narcotics from raids, laundered money through fake overtime, and kicked back to a handful of captains." Malik's eyes darkened. How far up does it go? Ortiz hesitated. 4 precincts, maybe higher. 1 deputy chief. Malik placed the tablet down. Then this is no longer a courtroom hearing. It's an intervention. He stepped out of chambers, the black robe flowing behind him like a shadow. The entire room froze, even Brennan, for all his bravado. Stop talking. Malik walked with measured calm to the bench, robe collar crisp, Purple Heart gleaming under the lights. The transformation was complete. No trace of the man in the Yale hoodie remained. Brennan whispered under his breath, "Oh, hell." Malik took the gavel in his hand and spoke quietly but clearly. "Sergeant Brennan, please rise." Brennan hesitated. For what? Malik looked down at him. For your own reckoning. Brennan stood, his smirk trembling at the edges. "You're not really doing this," Malik replied. "You assaulted a sitting federal judge, on federal grounds, while engaged in criminal conspiracy. This courtroom will serve as your mirror." ADA. Chen rose from her seat. Voice low. "Judge Washington, I need clarification. Are you assuming jurisdiction in your own case?" Malik's tone didn't change. "I am assuming authority. There's a difference." Chen swallowed, glancing toward the door. But Ortiz stood in front of it like a wall. Malik raised the gavel. "For 11 months, the FBI has recorded every conversation in your task force. Sergeant, every word, every deal, every boast." Brennan tried to interrupt. "That's illegal surveillance." Malik's voice cut through him. "No, it was authorized under Title III. You were part of a federal probe for racketeering, narcotics, and obstruction. I signed the warrant myself." The words hit the room like a grenade. Chen turned to Malik, stunned. "You signed it?" Malik nodded. "I recused myself from public oversight but retained clearance as a consultant. What you didn't know is that every step you took since January was monitored." Brennan's jaw dropped. "You set me up?" Malik's voice was calm. "No. You set yourself up when you chose greed over oath." He turned toward Ortiz. "Bring in the evidence." Ortiz carried a metal case to the bench, unlocking it with a fingerprint pad. Inside, 3 encrypted drives blinked with blue light. Malik inserted one into the courtroom monitor. The screen came alive. 8 synchronized videos from the last 11 months. Brennan on camera, laughing with cartel contacts, cash counted, drugs weighed, body cam footage turned off mid-arrest. Malik pressed play on a clip from 2 nights prior. Brennan's voice filled the courtroom. 50 keys clean. Captain gets 10%. We clear the docks by dawn." Brennan lunged forward. "That's taken out of context." Malik's stare didn't move. "Context doesn't change the cocaine on your hands." The judge switched clips. Another video. Brennan and his crew celebrating at an Irish pub. Brennan bragging, "I own this city. I make more than the DA." Laughter filled the screen. Kelly muttered a prayer under his breath. Realizing it was over, Malik spoke again, tone almost sorrowful. "I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Sergeant, I hoped there was something redeemable. But every file tells the same story." He turned to the court clerk, who was recording every word. "Mark the record. The defendant was under active federal investigation and continued to commit criminal acts while on duty. Proceeding to the next phase." Brennan slammed his fist on the table. "You think you can just play God? I've got friends in the union, in the department, in City Hall." Malik leaned forward. "You had them." His voice softened, almost pitying. "But they're all watching this live." Rizzo's phone buzzed. He looked down, face draining of color. "Sarge, this is on TV. Channel 7's streaming it." Brennan turned to see the cameras outside the glass. Reporters pressed against the door, capturing everything. Malik's image filled every screen across the country. The man who had walked in cuffed was now holding a gavel, Ortiz whispered. "They're asking if they should cut the feed." Malik shook his head. Let it run. He looked back at Brennan. The public deserves to see what justice looks like when no one hides behind badges. Brennan's last defense was rage. You think this makes you a hero? Malik answered softly. No, it makes me accountable. He looked down at the gavel again. You see, Sergeant, I was trained to fight wars overseas, but I learned the real war never left home. He raised the gavel and struck it once, hard, final. This court recognizes the shift of authority. Judge Elias Goldstein is recused. I, Federal Judge Malik Washington, preside over all proceedings related to this case under emergency jurisdiction of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. The room was silent, no one daring to breathe. Malik looked at Ortiz and said, "Seal the room. Anyone leaves, they answer to me." Then he turned toward Brennan and spoke words that carried more weight than any verdict. You wanted to control this city through fear. I'll rebuild it through truth. As Malik's words echoed off the marble walls, Ortiz's phone buzzed again. Rahman's final message. Do it your way. Malik, we're behind you. He looked at the judge, who gave a small nod, and for the first time in years, Ortiz smiled. Justice had finally chosen its battlefield, and Malik Washington, the silent hammer, was ready to strike. At 9:27 a.m., the courtroom doors opened again, and every head turned. Judge Malik Washington walked back to the bench in full robe, the deep black fabric flowing like the return of authority itself. The air grew tense. The same man who had entered in handcuffs now moved with the stillness of command. Brennan's smirk disappeared. Even the faintest sound from the wooden pews seemed to vanish. Malik placed the engraved gavel on the bench, its metal plate reading Fallujah 2004. He tapped it once, a soft warning shot that felt heavier than any yell. This court, he began, is now under federal jurisdiction. His voice was calm but carried through the room like thunder rolling over steel. Brennan laughed nervously. You can't be serious. Malik turned to him, eyes steady. Do I look like a man joking? Sergeant? Brennan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Malik raised his hand toward the gallery. All present will remain seated. All devices stay recording. There will be no secrets in this courtroom. The reporters froze. The officers at the back shifted, and Ortiz stood by the door like a silent guardian. Malik looked to the clerk. Note for the record, this hearing concerns criminal conduct by NYPD Sergeant Connor Brennan. Badge number 4869, including obstruction, assault on a federal officer, narcotics conspiracy, and violation of civil rights. Brennan's attorney, brought in by the union minutes earlier, tried to object. Your Honor, this proceeding violates every due process. Malik cut him off. Counselor, you represent a man who slapped a sitting judge and funded his retirement through cocaine. You're lucky I let you keep your seat. The lawyer sat down. Brennan clenched his jaw, the color draining from his face. You think you can just turn this around on me? Malik replied evenly. No. Sergeant, I'm simply turning the lights on. He motioned to Ortiz, who dimmed the courtroom lights until the screens glowed brighter. 8 synchronized feeds appeared on the projector. Brennan and his men in squad cars, warehouses, alleys, bars. One clip showed Brennan laughing while dividing seized cocaine into duffel bags. Another caught him shaking hands with a Dominican supplier. The timestamps overlapping with official police shift logs, gasps rippled through the courtroom. Malik let them watch for several seconds before speaking again. 11 months, he said quietly. 11 months of wiretaps, text logs, and hidden cameras. You bragged about being untouchable. You sold death to the very people you swore to protect. Brennan banged a fist on the table. This is entrapment. Malik leaned forward. Entrapment requires innocence. You were never innocent. Chen, now pale but professional, whispered to Ortiz. Are those bureau authorized? Malik overheard her. Yes. I approve the order. Chief Judge Rahman authorized full surveillance under the RICO statute after 3 confirmed civilian deaths connected to Brennan's unit. Chen exhaled slowly, realizing she was now watching a federal takedown unfold in real time. Brennan's lawyer stood again, sweating. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Malik cut him off. So is a cop selling dope and murdering children. His gavel cracked down hard, sharp as a rifle shot. The sound echoed. You think your badge makes you untouchable? My badge was earned in Fallujah. You can't scare me. Sergeant, I've buried braver men for less. The screen switched to another clip. This one made the room collectively flinch. Brennan stood in an alley, body cam rolling, gun drawn. A 16-year-old boy raised his hands, crying. Brennan fired twice, killing him instantly, on video. Brennan laughed and said, "One less dealer." The courtroom erupted, reporters shouting, one juror weeping, officers turning away. Brennan lunged for the power cable, but Ortiz intercepted, slamming him back into the chair. Sit down, Ortiz barked. Malik's voice carried over the chaos, cold and exact. That was Jamal Pierce, 16 years old, unarmed. You reported that as justified force. You lied. You tampered with the footage, but the Bureau had your backup stream. Brennan tried to speak, but his voice broke. That kid pulled something. Malik slammed the gavel again. Enough! He leaned forward, his tone dropping to a whisper that somehow filled the room. You don't get to rewrite the dead. Then, turning to the gallery, he said, let the world hear this. Ortiz nodded, sending the feed live to the federal press room downstairs. Within seconds, the footage streamed across every news network, on Times Square billboards, on phones, in precinct break rooms, everywhere. Hashtag Foley Square Slap trended #1 within minutes. Outside, crowds swelled beneath the courthouse steps. Protesters, law students, and off-duty officers gathered as word spread that the man arrested this morning was, in fact, a federal judge, and that he had just exposed one of the largest corruption rings in NYPD history. Reporters shouted updates through microphones. Judge Malik Washington now presiding in his own courtroom. Evidence includes 11 months of FBI wiretaps, helicopters circled above, cameras flashing through the tall courthouse windows. Inside, Malik continued. You used your badge to build an empire of fear. You humiliated civilians, falsified warrants, and pocketed blood money. But today, that ends. He turned toward the defense table. Officer Rizzo, Detective Kelly, stand up. Both men hesitated. On your feet, Malik commanded. They rose, shaking. You will cooperate with federal authorities. You will surrender your weapons and badges immediately. Kelly choked out. Please, sir, we didn't know. Malik's reply was calm but final. You always know. You just didn't care. The courtroom clock ticked 9:43 a.m. The line between judge and avenger blurred, but no one moved to stop him. Chen finally spoke, voice trembling. Judge Washington, are you sentencing already? Malik turned to her. His eyes softened for the first time. No, I'm revealing the truth. Sentencing comes when lies run out. He glanced toward the back wall, where a portrait of Justice Thurgood Marshall hung. Justice isn't blind. Ms. Chen, it's just patient. Brennan, desperate, slammed his palm against the table. You think the city's gonna stand by this? I'll have your robe, your pension, your... Malik's gavel cracked again. You had your chance. Sergeant, I gave you the law. You gave me a slap. Now I'm giving you your legacy. He gestured to Ortiz, who handed him a sealed folder marked FBI 19821. Malik opened it and read aloud. On March 12th, 2024, Sergeant Connor Brennan engaged in unauthorized sale of confiscated narcotics. On June 8th, 2024, He participated in extortion against minority-owned businesses. On October 28, 2024, he assaulted a federal officer. Each charge carries a maximum sentence of 45 years under federal statute. The defense attorney shouted, "This is madness." Malik looked at him coldly. "No. Counselor, this is order restored." He raised the gavel high, under emergency authority of the United States District Court and in cooperation with the Department of Justice. This proceeding is recognized as binding. Sergeant Brennan, you are hereby remanded to federal custody pending sentencing. Ortiz moved behind Brennan, clamping cuffs over his wrists. The sergeant's face crumpled, disbelief giving way to panic. "You can't do this," he stammered. "You're destroying me." Malik's gaze was unflinching. "You destroyed yourself. I'm just signing the obituary." As Ortiz led Brennan to the holding chamber, Malik called out one last time, "Sergeant." Brennan turned, eyes wet, rage mixed with fear. "You said this was your city," Malik said quietly. "Now it belongs to justice." The gavel fell with a sound that shook the room, 3 sharp strikes, like the memory of distant gunfire. And for the first time in years, silence inside the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse felt like peace. At 9:45 a.m., the screens behind the bench flickered again, and Judge Malik Washington raised his hand to silence the noise. The crowd outside was now a roar, reporters shouting, protesters chanting his name. Phones lifted high as the live stream carried every second to millions. Inside, the tension was electric. Malik's eyes scanned the courtroom. "This next evidence," he said slowly, "comes from the Bureau's deepest file, Wiretap 88C, recorded over 11 months. It reveals the full reach of Sergeant Brennan's criminal network." He pressed a button on his tablet. The speakers crackled, and Brennan's own voice filled the room. "We move the coke through impound. Split the cash. Captain gets 20. Union covers the rest. Nobody checks evidence. Easy money." The sound was cold, boastful, and undeniable. Brennan's face went white. "That's fake!" he shouted. Malik ignored him. The next clip played, Brennan laughing in a parking lot. "The judge don't care. I got him eating out of my hand. He's too scared to cross the blue wall." Malik's voice sliced through the air. "You were wrong. Sergeant, the judge you mocked is the one you're facing now." Kelly and Rizzo started to crumble. Rizzo whispered, "I didn't know he was recording all that." Malik looked down at them. "You knew. You just hoped no one would listen." He tapped again, and a video replaced the waveform. It was Brennan. 2 nights earlier, in a dingy Queens garage, he handed over a black duffel bag to a man later identified as Luis Torres, lieutenant for the Dominican cartel. Inside the bag, 50 kilos of pure cocaine, wrapped and stamped with evidence tags from NYPD impound. The audience gasped. Ada Chen took a step forward, her voice trembling. This was last night?" Malik nodded. "At 11:42 p.m. You transferred federal evidence to cartel control." "The Bureau was watching from the next building," Brennan shouted. "You don't know what you're talking about." Malik's tone stayed calm. "I know exactly what I'm talking about, because the man who recorded it." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Was your own partner?" Kelly's face broke. "I didn't want to." "Sarge," he cried. "They said I'd go down if I didn't cooperate." Brennan's voice was pure venom. "You snitched on me?" Malik lifted a hand. "Enough. You all snitched on the law long before today." He looked at Ortiz. "Play file 11G." The bailiff nodded. A grainy 8K feed appeared on the main screen. Body cam footage from 2019, a timestamp blinking. Brennan and his crew cornered a young black teen in a narrow alley. The boy raised both hands, terrified. Brennan's voice on the recording, "Drop it or die." The boy didn't move fast enough. 2 shots cracked. The screen flashed white, then cut to Brennan laughing, "One less dealer." The silence that followed was unbearable. In the back, a woman sobbed. Chen's voice broke as she whispered, "That's Jamal Pierce. He was 16. Malik nodded. Yes, unarmed. The report said he lunged, but this, he gestured to the footage. This shows the truth. Brennan buried his face in his hands, trembling. No words left. Malik turned toward him, his voice softer but heavy. You took a life and buried it under paperwork. You thought time would wash it clean, but time doesn't forget. Neither do I. The camera feed shifted again. Live footage from outside the courthouse. Crowds had filled Foley Square, chanting justice for Jamal and Washington for mayor. Helicopters hovered overhead. On social media, the clip of Brennan's slap replayed in endless loops, captioned, "The slap that ended the blue wall." Malik took a breath, his tone steady but edged with emotion. For months, I watched you destroy this city's trust. I watched you trade your badge for blood money. And when I finally faced you this morning, you saw a hoodie instead of a man. He leaned forward. That was your last mistake. Brennan's lawyer tried to interrupt. Your Honor, I object. Malik raised a hand. Objection overruled. His eyes flicked toward Ortiz. Bring me the final statement. Ortiz walked to the bench with a sealed file. DOJ letterhead, signed by Chief Judge Rahman and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District. Malik opened it, scanning quickly, then began reading aloud. Effective this hour, the United States Department of Justice authorizes immediate suspension of NYPD Task Force 217, seizure of all personal and financial assets belonging to Sergeant Connor Brennan, and transfer of jurisdiction to federal custody under RICO and Title 18, Section 242. The entire courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for photos, cameras flashing non-stop. Brennan stood up, shouting, You can't take my pension. You can't take my name. Malik's reply was like a verdict from heaven. You forfeited both when you raised your hand against justice. He hit the gavel once, sharp, final. The sound cut through Brennan's words like a blade. Ortiz and 2 U.S. Marshals stepped forward. Brennan tried to back away, voice cracking. You're destroying my life, Malik said evenly. You destroyed it yourself. I'm just reading the eulogy. Outside, the live feed hit 3 million viewers in under 20 minutes. Hashtag Foley Square Slap trended across every platform. Clips replaying the moment Brennan slapped Malik. Then the reversal that followed. Commentators called it the most shocking legal broadcast in modern history. Protesters shouted, End the blue wall, while officers from other precincts began to arrive. Some in solidarity, others in disbelief. Inside, Malik wasn't finished. He motioned for Ortiz to dim the lights once more. Play the final recording, the speakers hissed. Then a familiar voice echoed. Brennan again, drunk and angry in a bar. I run this city. Judges are scared of us. They need us. Malik leaned forward, his tone a quiet fury. You thought fear was power, but power without conscience is just noise. He paused, staring directly at him. You called this your city. From now on, it belongs to the people. He stood, lifting the gavel. By authority of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, this court finds Sergeant Connor Brennan guilty of obstruction of justice, drug trafficking, and violation of civil rights. Sentencing will be pronounced immediately. Brennan shook his head wildly. No, 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 this is wrong. Malik ignored him. 45 years in federal prison, no parole, forfeiture of pension, and permanent ban on law enforcement for all descendants under your name. The words landed like a hammer. Brennan's knees buckled. My son, he whispered. He didn't do anything. Malik's expression didn't change. Neither did Jamal Pierce. For a long moment, the courtroom stayed frozen in silence. The crowd outside could be heard chanting Malik's name. Reporters whispered, This will change everything. Malik turned to Chen. Prepare transfer documents, effective immediately. Chen nodded, tears in her eyes. She looked at Brennan and whispered, "You could have stopped all this with one apology." Brennan didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. Broken. Malik finally addressed the room. "Today, justice speaks without fear. Let the record show that no uniform, no title, no name will ever be above the law." He raised the gavel one last time. "This session is adjourned." The gavel struck 3 times, echoing through marble and wood, and as the sound faded, Brennan was led out in cuffs, the same way he had dragged Malik hours earlier. The irony was unbearable. Cameras flashed. Ortiz stood beside Malik, whispering, "It's done." "Sir." Malik nodded, eyes distant. "No, Ortiz," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." As Brennan was escorted out to the waiting marshals, his phone buzzed in evidence storage. On the screen, a single text from his teenage son. "Liam. Dad. What's happening?" Brennan never saw it. Upstairs, Malik's son Jaden stood outside the courthouse, holding a sign that read, "My dad is the judge." The two worlds had finally collided, the corrupt and the righteous, the lie and the truth. And in the middle stood a man who had taken a slap and turned it into a reckoning for a city. At 10:15 a.m., Judge Malik Washington leaned forward, the courtroom lights casting a faint glow across his black robe. The air felt heavy, half relief, half reckoning. The FBI agents entered quietly from the side door, their presence confirming what everyone already knew. The fall of the blue wall had begun. Brennan sat at the defendant's table, his face pale and slick with sweat, hands trembling in the cuffs he once used on others. Malik took a deep breath, glancing at the inscription on his gavel. Fallujah 2004. The sound of his heart was steady, but his mind flashed back to the desert, to soldiers staring at him for orders under fire. Justice, he remembered, was never calm. It demanded courage in the moment you least expected. "Sergeant Brennan," he said, voice firm but not cruel. "You stand convicted on multiple federal counts. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and your crimes have not only violated the law but betrayed the oath of your badge," Brennan muttered. "I was doing my job." Malik looked at him, almost pitying. "Your job was to protect, not prey." He paused, letting the silence hold. Then he continued. "For 11 months, you and your associates enriched yourselves while families buried their sons. You mocked the very system that gave you power. And this morning, you struck a man you thought was beneath you." Brennan's breathing grew ragged. "It was a mistake," he whispered. Malik's reply was cold. "A mistake ends with an apology. You made a choice. Every slap, every bullet, every bribe. You chose them." The crowd in the gallery sat motionless, hanging on every word. Malik straightened the stack of documents before him. "Under federal statute, your charges include obstruction of justice, racketeering, narcotics distribution, falsification of evidence, and aggravated assault on a federal officer. Each offense carries a separate penalty, but this court will consider them together under the RICO framework." He looked directly at Brennan. Voice clear. "You will serve 45 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole." Gasps filled the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Brennan's lawyer jumped up, shouting, "Your Honor, this is excessive. You can't." Malik slammed the gavel once. "Sit down. Counselor." The echo silenced him instantly. Malik continued. "The court also orders the forfeiture of all assets acquired through illegal activity, including your pension. Those funds will be used to compensate the families of your victims. Specifically, $4,100,000 will be distributed through a federal settlement fund." Brennan's eyes widened. "That's my retirement!" Malik looked at him with unblinking calm. "It was never yours. It belonged to the people you hurt. He motioned toward Ortiz. Bring the restitution list. Ortiz handed him a file, and Malik opened it carefully, reading each name. Jamal Pierce, 16, deceased. His mother, Deborah Pierce, will receive $1.2 million. Tyrone Jacobs, paralyzed after a wrongful arrest. Settlement, $85,000. Maria Vasquez, business owner extorted by your unit. Settlement, $62,000. The remaining funds will establish the Justice Integrity Scholarship, providing education for children of families affected by police misconduct. The gallery began to clap softly, but Malik raised a hand. This is not victory. He said, it's repair. Brennan suddenly broke, his voice cracking under the weight. Please, my son, don't punish my family. Malik studied him for a long moment, expression unreadable. Your son will carry your name, he said quietly. He'll live with what you've done, but the court will not harm him. Life will handle that on its own. Brennan lowered his head, shoulders shaking, in the back row. Reporters whispered updates, broadcasting the verdict live across every major outlet, on television screens across America. Viewers saw the image of Brennan in cuffs, his career and pride shattered. Some called it vengeance, others called it the rebirth of justice. Malik turned toward the gallery, his tone shifting from judicial to reflective. This city has lived under the weight of fear for too long, he said. Too many good officers have been silenced by bad ones. Too many families have been torn apart by those sworn to protect them. Today, that cycle breaks. He glanced down at his son's photograph taped to the inside of his gavel's handle. Justice isn't perfect, but it begins when we stop being silent. Brennan looked up weakly. You think you're saving anyone? You just made enemies. Malik's reply was quiet but deadly. Enemies don't scare me. Sergeant, cowards do, and I stopped fearing them a long time ago. He leaned back in his chair. You've lived your whole life hiding behind a badge, using it as a weapon. Now you'll spend the rest of it remembering what a real badge stands for. Ortiz stepped forward. Marshals, take him. The federal officers moved in. Brennan resisted at first, then slumped as they pulled him to his feet. My son. He tried to speak again, but Malik's voice cut through. Your son will grow up free. You made sure others didn't. Brennan's body went limp as the marshals escorted him toward the exit. For a brief second, Malik thought he saw tears. As the door closed behind Brennan, Malik set down his gavel and rubbed his temples. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by exhaustion. Ada Chen approached the bench. Judge Washington, she said softly, the Bureau's requesting your signature to finalize the indictments. 28 officers total. Malik nodded. Tell them to move fast. The city deserves closure. She hesitated, then added quietly, what you did today, it's unprecedented. Malik looked at her. No, he said, voice low but firm. It's overdue. Ortiz placed a hand on his shoulder. Sir, you okay? Malik nodded faintly. I will be... He stood, facing the gallery one last time. Before we adjourn, let the record reflect that justice does not belong to one man. It belongs to all who stand for it, no matter the cost. He raised the gavel again, this time striking it slowly, deliberately, 3 times. Each hit sounded heavier, like the closing of a chapter. Outside. The crowd erupted as news broke of the sentence. Reporters shouted into microphones. Sergeant Connor Brennan sentenced to 45 years. Federal Judge Malik Washington presides over one of the most historic rulings in SDNY history. Protesters waved signs reading "Justice lives here and no one is above the law." In Queens, Brennan's teenage son, Liam, sat in his room, watching the live stream on his phone. The chat scrolled with fury and applause. He opened his father's photo album. Pictures of medals, parades, old partners. Then he looked at his own reflection in the dark screen. Minutes later, He looped a belt around the ceiling fan. By the time the marshals delivered the news to Malik, it was too late. Ortiz entered the judge's chamber. "Face pale, sir," he said softly. "There's something you should know." Malik turned, weary. "What now?" Ortiz hesitated. "Brennan's son. He's gone." The judge froze. The air left the room. "How?" Ortiz whispered. "He hung himself after watching the hearing." Malik closed his eyes, the gavel still in his hand. He said nothing for a long moment, then he whispered, "The sins of the father." He placed the gavel back on the bench and stood in silence. Outside. The city cheered. Inside. Justice had cost another life. Malik looked up at the portrait of Thurgood Marshall and said quietly, "Let them cheer. But tonight, I'll pray for the boy." The camera kept rolling as he turned away from the bench, robe trailing behind him like a shadow. Justice had been served, but peace would take much longer to arrive. 6 months later, New York had changed. The footage from Foley Square had become the most watched live stream in the city's history. 86 million views, translated into 15 languages, taught in law schools as "The Day Justice Spoke Back." The NYPD's Blue Wall chat room had been dismantled. 28 officers indicted under Operation Blue Fall. Chief Judge Aliyah Rahman led the task force that restructured the department's oversight model, mandating civilian auditors and public transparency boards. And in the center of it all, Judge Malik Washington, once the man humiliated on his own courthouse steps, had become the face of accountability. The federal government renamed the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse the Justice Malik Washington Federal Courthouse. His name was carved beneath the statue where he once bled. Reporters said no moment better defined America's shift toward reform. But behind the cameras, Malik lived quietly, refusing interviews, working late into the night to finish cases left behind by corrupted judges. When Brennan's death inside ADX Florence made national news, stabbed 37 times by an inmate whose brother had been one of his victims, Malik didn't gloat. He simply closed his laptop and said to Ortiz, "Evil always finds its way home." Ortiz nodded but could see the exhaustion behind his eyes. Every decision, every headline, every speech had turned Malik from man to symbol. His son Jaden had returned from Yale for the summer, now leading youth reform panels under a citywide program called Future Justice. Malik smiled when he saw the photos, but rarely went to the rallies. "This movement isn't about me," he told Jaden one evening. "It's about the ones who won't make the news," Jaden replied. "Maybe, but you showed people what one man can do when he stops being afraid." Malik said nothing, only placed a hand on his son's shoulder and whispered, "Fear never disappears. You just learn to speak louder than it." By August, whispers of a mayoral run had become front-page news. Banners read, "I took the slap. Now I take the city." Crowds filled Union Square, chanting his name as if he were already elected. Ada Vanessa Chen, now leading the Public Integrity Bureau, became his campaign advisor, pushing him to use his voice for reform beyond the courtroom. "You've already done what no one dared," she said. "Now take it further." Malik hesitated. A judge protects law. A mayor builds trust. The two don't always mix. Chen smiled. "Neither does courage and comfort. But you've never cared about comfort." The first poll released that September shocked every strategist in the state. Malik Washington led the mayoral race by 31 points. His base was diverse. Police reform advocates, veterans, clergy, single parents, even moderate officers who saw him as a man who held everyone accountable. His speeches were simple, stripped of theatrics. Justice isn't revenge, it's repair. And New York needs repair. By then, even Washington's political rivals had stopped underestimating him. At a televised debate, one opponent tried to mock him. "You think you can run this city just because you took a slap?" Malik looked straight into the camera and replied, "No, I can run it because I didn't hit back." The crowd erupted. That clip alone carried his campaign for weeks. Meanwhile, Operation Blue Fall reached its conclusion. 42 convictions, including 2 deputy chiefs and 1 former precinct commander. The Justice Integrity Scholarship, funded by Brennan's forfeited pension, sent its first 5 recipients to college. Children of the very families Brennan had victimized at the opening ceremony. Jaden spoke in his father's place. "My dad taught me that silence can be a weapon," he said. "But today, we speak so no one else has to suffer quietly." Malik watched the broadcast from his office, tears gathering silently at the corner of his eyes. "He's better than I ever was," he whispered. When Malik finally walked back to Foley Square one cool autumn morning, the city was quieter. The marble was clean again. The blood stain from that day was gone. But the memory remained. He placed his hand on the bronze base of Thurgood Marshall's statue. The new inscription below gleamed in the sun. Here, Justice answered with a gavel. Ortiz, standing a few steps behind him, said softly, "You changed everything." "Sir?" Malik smiled faintly. "No, Ortiz. The truth did. I just stopped running from it." Later that day, Malik filed his resignation letter. In it, he wrote one line that every newspaper would quote for years. "The bench taught me to speak law. The city taught me to speak humanity." That night, standing before a crowd of 50,000, he announced his mayoral campaign formally. "I took the slap," he said, voice firm. "But I didn't strike back. Because justice doesn't hit. It rebuilds." The crowd erupted, chanting his name under the glow of New York's skyline. As the applause faded, Malik looked out over the sea of faces, young and old, white and black, police and civilian, and felt something shift inside him. For the first time in months, the anger had lifted. The weight of that morning on the courthouse steps was still there, but lighter now, wrapped in purpose. He turned to Jaden beside him and whispered, "This is for her," Jaden asked. "For who?" Malik smiled softly. "For your mother. For everyone who still believes justice is worth the fight." The cameras panned wide as he raised his hand to wave, the city roaring beneath him. In that moment, Malik Washington was no longer just a judge. He was a reminder that one act of courage, born from humiliation, could shake a nation awake. And as the night lights of Manhattan shimmered against the courthouse windows, the city finally seemed to breathe again. Justice had fallen, risen, and walked into the streets as a man who refused to stay silent. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments.